And we are live.
Sounds great.
Okay, so today we have on our podcast Abbhi Sekar, and he is a strategist from Deloitte. He has been in the recruit, not in the recruiting part, but on the part of giving advice on LinkedIn and asking people and and connecting with people who are able to teach and be able to share his advice on giving the right applicable advice on applying for jobs. He has shared his content on LinkedIn regarding how to find a career path, how to prepare your resumes, how to do your behavior analysis, how to excel in your career, and many more such things. Today, we are going to talk to Abhi and distill the most important parts of applying for a job, scaling your career, and much more. Thank you, Abhi, for joining the podcast. Please introduce yourself.
Of course. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is a great opportunity. As you mentioned, my name is Abbhi. I am out of New York. I work at Deloitte Consulting as a strategy analyst and primarily focused in the tech, media, and entertainment industry. As he also mentioned, the focus here today is to help people land their dream job. And I've been posting content and I'm going to start a newsletter for helping with interviews, resumes, just the whole job cycle, and create very actionable tips for people to follow in a very simple format. So I'm here today kind of to talk more details about some of the content I've already posted, as well as hopefully answer any questions that are lingering on people's minds and dive into any details. Thank you so much.
What are you obsessed nowadays, Abhi?
So what's my biggest interest?
Yeah, what's your obsession right now? What are you currently obsessed with?
So I'm really interested. I'm really interested in kind of the interview life cycle and making sure people kind of understand the role of like what exactly to do, like prepare to form kind of behavioral analysis and make sure they are prepared with their different stories. So I think like just my obsession would be to help people land their dream job through making sure they know all the right information through for resumes, interviews, and more. And I think just making sure that is available in a very actionable and simple way is what I'm working on or what I'm obsessed with today.
Yeah, I asked that question because you wrote an article regarding how to prepare your stellar resume, and I found something that is very much different from what others advise. Because what you said is make your resume in Google XYZ format, meaning that you do X, you got the result of Y, and that impacted the Z. Talk us through that.
Yeah, of course. So I think, as you mentioned, the Google XYZ format talks about make sure you talk about what you did, make sure to talk about how you did it, like what tools or different softwares you used, and then most importantly, talked about the impact and the results. So I think this is a great and easy template to follow because a lot of people talk about the what they did. Then they forget about talking about the how, and then often forget talking about the impact. But really, the most important part is your impact. So, for example, if I say, okay, I did research on competitors. Okay, but people are lingering like, so what? Where did that research get you? Like, did it increase revenue, or like did it create a new partnership, or did it this diligence? Like, how did it help your team? Like, were you able to like pivot your product feature because now you know what your competitors are doing, and figuring out a way to really ideally quantify that impact. So may it be increased revenue by 10%, or created like 10 plus partnerships with Fortune 500 conglomerates. It's like you want to try to quantify that impact, and you should always try to include it because the recruiters want to scan for impact. They want to know what you did, but they want to also know like how you impacted the people around you, and that's actually the most important part. So I think that template, the Google XYZ, is kind of the easy way to always remember to do so, and I think it's one of the biggest mistakes people make. So that's my thoughts there.
You said how you impacted other people in on your team. Go deeper on that.
Yeah, so that may be so. If you, let's say you helped, let's say you did research like for a competitor, and or you met with different like stakeholders or different team members, like how was that in the goal of your team and like what impact was it? So let's say if you're meeting with a bunch of different project teams in order to organize like a product feature or keep it on track, like the impact was like keeping the product feature like aligned with its timeline and making sure like or like you sped up the product speed or product timeline by 10%, let's say. Like I think maybe impact on your team, but also like just a broader impact of the goal. So like if you're doing something, a lot of people want to know why. Like what is the goal of what you're doing? So that's where impact comes in. It's saying, okay, I did this thing, but now people want to know why I did it. And then did it actually have any impact? Like were there any results? And sometimes this is very hard to come up with or like so like the best advice is keeping a running list of your accomplishments while working. I call this a running resume. And if you keep a running accomplishment list, it'll be easier to quantify your impact when you have to write your resume because a lot of people say, okay, first of all, I don't know how to quantify my impact. Second of all, I don't remember those details. Okay, so first of all, let's try to brainstorm ways so you can quantify the impact. Second of all, you want to keep this running resume so you can make sure that you do remember those details. So I think that's some advice that you should take with this as well.
Okay. If a candidate has to design his resume, what advice would you give? What 3 point advice would you give that must go on the resume?
All right, so basic like name, like the where you're located, like LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile linked. So always have a LinkedIn profile. So that's like the top, like very basic. The second I would say is you need professional experience, like generally speaking, maybe that be work, leadership, depending on where you are in your career, like you want to have your professional experiences. Um, and then third, I would actually say would be like hobbies. Like that's like a, I would say like skills and hobbies. Like a lot of people forget about that. But like yes, you want your education, especially depending on how relevant the education is. And if you're like in the education stage, you want it at the top of your resume, and if you're done with the stage, you want it like close to the bottom. But the skills and hobbies is, I would say, an underrated section because it's easy to call out like what skills are relevant to the job you're applying to, and it's also hobbies make you more relatable and like there's a human connection there. And I think that's underrated because even though resumes are professional profile, hobbies help you connect. So if I'm into tennis and their hobby is playing tennis, I relate to them a little bit more. And people hire people that they relate to. They hire people that they like, that they share experiences with. So I think that those three are really important. I think having education on there is a must as well. And then a lot of people talk about like a highlight reel for the top of your resume, not like a career summary, not like something long and dull and boring, but something like 3 to 5 sentences of like your core impact and exactly like what your mission is. And just something like if you were to scan your resume and it takes time to do that, what do you want them to know? That let's say that is the top, like a very much a simple highlight reel at the top that's short and sweet, so the recruiter doesn't have to read the whole thing. And I think it depends on where you're in your career to do that, but those are my main tips, but can dive deeper into any of them as well.
You said people hire people who they relate to. Go deeper on that.
Yeah, so I think it is underrated that it's interviews and hiring process is a one way street. It's actually like very much a two-way street. It's a two-way conversation, and if you just think like, okay, like who do I like? Who are my friends? Like, okay, they're usually people that have shared experiences with you, or like you like them because you relate to them, and like it's the same thing. If someone's going to work with you, that means they probably have to spend a lot of time with you. And objectively speaking, if they have to spend a lot of time with you, they're going to want to like you, they want to be friends with you, they want to be relatable. So number one is like you always want to like tell your experiences like you're telling stories because you want to engage the interviewer. That makes it more of a two-way conversation. Like asking relevant questions like in the interview stage, that's like making yourself more relatable, and like I talked in the resume phase with the different hobbies. I think like that aspect is really underrated, but like if you're on the other side of things, like think about what they're thinking about. It's not all professionalism. It's easy to say like they're only going to look at like these professional aspects, but at the end of the day, a lot of people have maybe similar professional aspects, and the people vouch for people. Number one, they know. Number two, they relate to more, and they have shared experiences with, and they can kind of say, okay, I understand this person. Let's bring him in for an interview. So I think that's where I would say like that's why it's so important. And it's not just like you want to come up with like holistic, like this human connection is like always going to be more valuable than like anything like super only professional. And yeah, that's what I would say there. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, Abhi?
Yes, now I can.
Yeah. What happens is people normally are more into people who are syncing with them. They are much more likely to be people who relate with them and have common interests. As you said, are most likely to be around people who have common interests, so to say, who are able to relate with them and able to understand them at a core level.
Exactly.
I get I get to that point because you're spending 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours with a person. You might have to get a year around them. You might better be having a common interest so that the team gets to sync with them correctly. Mhm.
Exactly. It's so important.
You mentioned about telling a story, and
Mhm.
you have a LinkedIn post as well of telling a story as well. How important or how to use storytelling for to ace your next interview? That is your LinkedIn post. If I share the screen a minute, we can see that post of yours. And okay, this was your interview. This was your LinkedIn post, and basically it said that people should be using storytelling to ace their interviews. And you have mentioned multiple points around that, such as use the SCARL method or 3 to 5 story points. Tell us more on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think storytelling in general for life is so important, and a lot of people put emphasis on it. So I think for interviews, they're just as important. The first step, like I'm mentioning, is coming up with your own stories. So I always come up with just a few, like 3 to 5 stories, let's say, from your own experiences. May that be work. You can pull it from your resume and see like what stories form. You can see like what's interesting and what's relevant to the job I'm applying to. So like what skills can I highlight in my experiences that relate as closely as possible to the job I'm applying to. Like that's a super important point because you're supposed to connect that bridge. And the actual story composition is, here I use the SCARL method. There's a lot of the STAR method and like a lot of other methods out there that all kind of are the same. They talk about, you really want to talk about the situation. So you want to give like the context of what you're saying. Like, what is the context? Like, set me in the scene. And you want to talk about the problem, the complication. Like, what are you, like, what is happening? Like, what am I, like, what is happening in the story that I need to solve? Then you're looking at figuring out like, what did I do, like what is the action that I did that relates to like this. So in that action you want to show the skills that relate to the job you want. So that's your time to be like, okay, this is what I did. And here, and a good tip is try to use I when you can. Like, you use we, because of course, like a lot of times you're working in a team, but in choice occasions definitely try to use I, because you want to show that you did it. If you keep using we like constantly in your actions, it sounds like you were just a part of the broader scheme of actions that don't show as much impact. So then once you look at actions, you want to talk about kind of like what were the results. So like I talked about for resumes, recruiters care about impact. They care about results. So it's the same thing. So like, we did this action, like, so what happened? Like, tell me more. Like, what exactly happened? And what was the impact of what you did? And then finally, which some methods don't include, but I think is valuable, is like, what did I learn from the experience? And this is important because interviewers and people alike want to know that you learn from your experiences, from your mistakes, from any stories, so that you can like implement those learnings in the future. And I think this is really important. And I think just stating that really explicitly here shows that, okay, this is what I learned, this is what I can do, and it closes out the story really well. So I think like including, so it's not, I wouldn't recommend like memorizing all these different steps. So it's like, it's all in your head, you get confused. Like, just practice. You want to practice. You want to have your stories like, yes, like originally you can write them down in steps like I did here. And then like it will flow better after you practice. But you kind of want to, once you become a great storyteller, it flows. Like, great storytellers tell stories like this without having to memorize this framework, but it's always great to have it in mind. So you always know like, okay, I'll set the scene. I'll talk about the problem. Here's what I did to solve the problem. Here's what the results of my actions were, and then this is what I learned from it. So it's fairly simple, but it's hard to remember during the interview, and that's why it takes practice. And you always have to remember to relate those skills to the job you want, which is super important. So yeah, that's kind of my overview of like storytelling during interviews, but open to answer more as well.
You mentioning about TLDR, the TLDR of your entire approach on storytelling. The one that caught my attention the most was use the I method. Tell me more on that.
Yeah, so I think it's a very common mistake or problem people run into during interviews, which I also do this during interviews. This is tough. But when we talk about our actions, when we are talking like, okay, I like did this during the job, a lot of people, including myself, start with we, because you work in a lot of times you're working in a team. Like, I work in a team too. It's hard to differentiate your own actions versus the rest of the broader team, and especially when you're talking about impact, it just wasn't you, so you want to use the framing we. But if you only use we, I think it's okay in some cases because you want to give appreciation to your team. But if you're only using we, it's weaker. Like, it's okay, like we, but like, what did you do? Like, yeah, that's why it's good like before the interview to really outline like, what did you, like, I exactly did outside of like the team, and then like, what can I vouch for during the interview instead of using we. So I think it's just a common problem, and like I think people do just instinctively, and then I do too. So it's just good to call out so people recognize it.
It is about taking ownership, basically the using the I method. Is that right?
Exactly. At least showing ownership. So like even if you took ownership, if you keep using we, it's not showing that you took ownership. And that's the important part that people need to understand.
Do do recruiters normally see this taking ownership, taking accountability, taking responsibility as a key feature, or what I can say is as a key characteristic in every candidate that they are looking to hire?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's different based on the role. So some roles they're looking for different things. So it's important to understand like reading the job descriptions prior and really understanding like what that role is looking for, like what skills like are they looking for strong communication skills or are they just looking for someone to code all day? Like those are different and they may look for different attributes in even in your like personality and skills. So I would say like I wouldn't make a blanket statement because it just depends on the role, but I think like I mean, being proactive, having a strong work ethic, taking ownership, being able to communicate well, being a kind person, being a helpful person, like all those different attributes, like I think are going to be relevant because people want to like you and people want to know you'll work hard and be proactive and be learning and taking ownership when you can. Um, but it's going to be different. So those would be some of my call outs, I would say.
Okay. The next thing that I normally see when a candidate or when one of my colleagues or friends are applying for the job, they basically don't know how to approach a recruiter, or what in layman terms we can say is they approach a recruiter and directly go and say, okay, I need a job, what can you do for me? What is your advice for them?
Yeah. So a lot of times, number one, approaching a recruiter is not the best way to go about it, especially because I mean, especially on LinkedIn, recruiters get messages all day. They could get hundreds of messages every single day. So any message you send them is not going anywhere. And number one, number two, a lot of times, you don't like if you were in that person's shoes, like if people are just constantly asking you for jobs for referrals immediately, like you're just not going to give it to them. And it's not worth their time. So I think the best way to go about this is first, like I don't know if I would approach recruiters. Like I think it's better if you can to approach the person that has the job you want at the company you want. So if I want to do product management at Apple, I want to talk to product managers at Apple because those people, even though they may not be they're not the recruiter per se. They likely have some power in the organization to refer you, depending on how the organization works, and that will get your resume seen by the recruiter. And the recruiters reaching out directly is just not the best way to do it. So I think like finding people who do the job you want and have the story you want, that's who you need to reach out to. But reaching out is a whole nother process that you want to do right. Because if you reach out to people asking for things, like think about yourself. Like if you get only asked for things, it's going to be annoying. So you want to give before you get anything. So finding ways to give value to the person is tough, but is the best way to do it before asking for anything. What I would recommend is like, for example, on LinkedIn, you can find people through the filtering system that have the job you want. Then like not everyone posts content or engages on LinkedIn, but if you can find people that do in that bucket, those would be your best targets because they're on LinkedIn more often. And then you want to follow them. You don't want to connect with them yet. You want to follow them, you want to engage with their content. You don't want to leave comments saying, "Oh, great content. Yay." You want to give comments that are like longer, more insightful, maybe posing another question, maybe add on to what their content they said if you can, sharing an article that said, hey, this relates to this. So that's where you're adding value. Then it's like, okay, the person's seeing you in their DM, seeing that you on their content. And then, like, let's say a week later or 5 days later, you send a personalized connection. Too many people don't like send connections without writing a blurb. Like, always write something, like, always, even if, unless you're like best friends, like, it's the best way to get connected. And then when in a person invite, you can say, hey, X, I love your content on XYZ. and I love your page. I have this article that I found that relates to your thing, to your content. Here's a link. I would love to connect and talk more. Period. Done. Or love to connect. Something like that. Period. Done. You can get your foot in the door. Like someone will answer that 100 times over 100 over the like asking for things. You're not asking for anything in that call, but like there's a very good chance they may connect with you and you're in the door then. And then at that point you can either try to ask for a call or even just messaging to form that relationship. And like now like eventually like you keep in touch, you have that relationship, you ask them for advice on this job, let's say, like keep giving value when you can, and then like you want to directly ask for a referral when the time it makes sense, and boom, like they could refer you, you're likely going to get an interview over another candidate because of that. So I think like it's a long system, yes, but it proves you're spending just as much. People are spending just as much time reaching out to random recruiters, spending like hundreds of hours applying online to different applications without doing any of this. If I spend 10 hours doing this instead of 10 hours applying to online jobs, I know I would get more interviews in this way. So it's like it's quantity. You have to keep reaching out to people in this way, and it's also quality. So you can't most people just focus on the quantity. And if you just focus on the quality, you'll feel like no one's responding because if you just reach out to two people, I can't guarantee you they'll respond because the rate is still going to be low. So you need to kind of optimize both. So it's a long system, but a lot of people don't do this right. No, most people, but if you do, you'll stand out immediately.
You mentioned about engaging productively, meaning commenting regularly, commenting on a regular basis with the recruiter's post or the post of a person who has the job, not particularly having the job, yet the person who has the power and the knowledge that okay, this woman or this man can have that knowledge that I'm looking for in my team. I might as well hire him. Go deeper on that.
Yeah. So I think I think the instinct is for people to reach out to recruiters because they're like at the front end of the job searching process. But yeah, the most important thing is to find people that are in the place you want to be. Because if you think about it, those are the people that know how to get there. They've done it. So you can learn a lot from them. They could help you out in the future for a lot of different things. If you want to do that role, like they can help you with a lot of like even aside from referrals, like even just advice would be really helpful. And they'd be more willing to talk to you by engaging with their content. So I think the biggest thing here is that don't I would say like people prioritize recruiters, but recruiters are getting hundreds of messages and a lot of times the wrong way. And prioritizing people that do the job you want is going to be a much better avenue. Um, yeah, that's what I would say.
Is that one of the biggest mistake a candidate makes when hiring a recruiter or while applying for a job?
100%. I think the biggest mistake is people ask for things without giving anything, and people don't think about trying to give anything. So it's like a reframing, like reframe it that you have to give something before asking. Like think about how many people you would help whenever you want without them giving you anything. Like yes, sometimes I would do that, but depending on the time I have, like I would help if someone is offering something and doing the same thing, of course I would preference that person. So I think that's definitely one of the biggest mistakes, and doing this right is hard, but extremely effective. Like if someone comments on my stuff like 5 times in a row, I know that person. They message me like I know their profile already because like that person comes up. Like I would respond to them over someone is messaging me randomly. Like I don't know if I would, depending on if they how many messages I have.
The correct a recruiter receives a day of 25 to 30 messages from candidate, and to be able to see okay, this candidate is following me like consistently is quite hard. And for anyone to do that, they have to stand out by giving something back. coming to that point, how would you recommend a candidate to optimize their LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, there's a lot of things, and it's a great question because again, most people kind of don't have a strong LinkedIn profile. And right now, we were talking about outbound reaching out, so like reaching out to people, but having a strong profile is like personal branding, and that way, people like recruiters will reach out to you. So, for example, I didn't have any recruiters reaching out to me. I optimized my profile and had about 10 to 20 recruiters reaching out every single week and without doing anything for the jobs I wanted. So the steps I would take is first of all, you want to update your headline. Your headline does not need to be your job. Your headline needs to be what your value is, your key skills, like relevant to the job you want. So like look at the job description of the job you want, like what are the key skills they're looking for, like and what can you connect anything to that? And if you can add that to your headline, like the value you give, like to just like your job, the job you want, ideally. Um, that's a great way to like kind of create a headline. Like for example, mine is sharing simple and actionable tips to help students and young professionals land their dream jobs. It's not my job. This is just like my straightforward value that I can give you when you come to my profile. So it's like treat it as a landing page, like a website, and you want people to reach out. So like that's number one. And people and recruiters search for keywords by like headline, by bio. So that's why it's so important. Um, Another one is your bio, your about section. It should include a lot of information about kind of your value you're giving in your current job. It should be pretty detailed. And the reason is because in these details, you want to say like what you do, how you do it, kind of similar to a resume um, in some of the bullets, um, because you want to include keywords that the job you want is looking for. So like if you look at your job descriptions for the job you want, they're going to talk about skills they want to see. Try to weave those into your about section because again, recruiters search on keywords and if they're searching for the job you want and they're going to look at those skills. So always put them and like try to integrate them into your about section because then like you'll come up over other people. Number three, the skills section. It's underrated. You can put 50 skills. Most people don't even have three. Three show up on the top, but like your first five skills are the most important. They'll show up to everyone, and they're also like by keywords. You want to like try to check the skills of the job you want. Put those skills. If you don't know them, learn them, and then put those on your LinkedIn profile, and then look at other keywords and try to add as many skills as you can that match these different keywords. Right now, I have 50 out of 50 skills, and if I didn't have the skills, I would learn them. So that's like kind of the goal because you'll come up on searches a lot more as well. And then my last two tips would be the banner. Like so, we're going back up to the profile. It's like behind your profile picture. The banner. Like you can make a new banner on like Canva. I really like it. You can literally just and then you can customize it. Most people don't have a customized banner. I would make one because it's just a good look. Like you can put anything on it. I would put like again like your value, your takeaway. Like it's the banner isn't searchable, but it's like once you get on the profile, like what's what do you want people to see? So I think like check out my profile and checking like how it looks. Mine's kind of it's all about like my branding, what I give to people, and like what I want them to see. So I think like a customized one about like your value, your hobbies, even like who you are, I think is really helpful. Um, and then the featured media, which is this media section that most people don't have under like their top head of the profile. Like right now, I have my newsletter linked and my free resume template, which I think so. You want to like some people have their like biggest posts. Some people have you can put anything that's linkable, anything that's downloadable. So like a project you worked on, like this is a great way to have your profile stand out because a lot of people don't use it. It could be um, it could be a project that so your resume is not that actionable. It's like okay, what you did, what your impact, but like a project is like super like it could be a huge standout feature, like different projects you've worked on, like a publication you have, and um, linking those is huge for searches and for just like credibility. So I think that is a great way to also stand out and just have it updated, have your experiences updated, make sure other experiences are like the same as your resume. Don't have them be wildly different. People check both. it's weird if one is lying and one isn't. Like you need to have the truth there on both, because like people will notice if they don't align. So I think those are like my top tips. I definitely have some more LinkedIn posts as well as kind of I'll talk about more in the future, but those would say that's where I would start, and you can use my profile as a guide.
You mentioned about the featured media. A portfolio can also be going on there, right?
What's up?
Portfolio such as for designers or graphic designers or videographers. They
Oh
want to
yes.
their personal profile or personal website that they have, and that can be shown on featured list as well.
Exactly. So previously, I had like my photography portfolio linked there, and so you can have like any portfolios, projects, really anything that has a link to it, or anything that you can download, you can put it on there. So really, it's very valuable that you can really put anything you've worked on in that section.
Is it acceptable, or is it taken for now from now that LinkedIn is the way of new resume?
I would say you need a resume and you need it to be impactful and you need it to be well formatted. I think you want your LinkedIn link on your resume, and people are going to check your LinkedIn because a lot of times your LinkedIn is one of the first things that come up when you look up like your name, depending on like what articles you have about you. But a lot of times LinkedIn comes up like first, so people will Google you. People will see your LinkedIn profile. That's why you need it to be updated. That's why like when you're applying to a job, and if you apply to a job through LinkedIn, like people obviously will check your profile. It's not enough. You need a resume and you need it to be good, but you need a LinkedIn profile. I think it's very beneficial to like your own personal branding and getting reached out by recruiters as well.
Once the recruiter is approached or once the call is set up and you are good with the call, the most important thing that everything comes down to is salary negotiations. What would you give your younger self an advice to max out on that?
Yeah, salary negotiations are always tough. The first thing is depends where you are in your stage of job. So if you're out of college, salary negotiations are a little different because like usually there's not much negotiating power you have just because it's like a new first job. When you get later and later in your career, it changes. You get more power with negotiations. People want you to stay more. The biggest like like the biggest way to get more like salary out of your negotiations is to have another job offer. It just makes you much more powerful just because, oh, I could go here and this is offering me this much, so you're gonna have to raise it or like I'm not gonna accept your offer. And if at that point they want you, they it's a great way to leverage. Like you can increase your salary by a ton if that is the case. If that's not the case, then then it's like you have to use, I would say like try to collect as much information as possible. You want to know like so you want to understand like their team budget, like what are they working with, like I like you need to understand that because like you don't want to ask for something wildly inappropriate that's just like not in their budget at all, and that just doesn't make sense. But you need to, but you always should try to negotiate, and you always should ask for more than you want because like they likely if they if they are on negotiating standards they'll meet you halfway potentially, but they may not give you exactly what you want. um, but it's important to remember that at that point you have the job, they want you, so don't be scared to negotiate. Like they want you. Starting the process over for them is a lot of work. It's a lot of money. It takes time. They don't want to do that. They found the person they want. It's easier for them to keep you. So negotiating is always something you should do. But there's always like mixed results. But like I'd say those are like you always want to collect the information. It sometimes takes time, and you want to be straightforward about it. Um, but yeah, those are some of my main tips.
The recruiters that I talk to, they basically say that do your research. As you said, collect more information. They put it as do your research for salary. Do you think that's important enough for a candidate with zero experience as well?
I think negotiating's a little different. So if you do have zero experience, like if you're coming out of school, like some university or something like that, like a lot of entry level jobs don't negotiate at all because I mean they're entry level jobs. It's a little different. So I would say I would say it depends. Some I've seen some entry level jobs negotiated, but for some like large conglomerates, like my role, it's there's no negotiations. They just tell you up front like we will not negotiate no matter what until manager and above for the most part. So I think I could you would try. There's no harm in asking. There really isn't, but it's going to be more effective after you're over your entry level position and you're like have a little bit more experience.
Once you have that quality as well as the knowledge that you can show and impact a greater decision, you can have more power in negotiating a salary. Correct?
Yep, exactly.
One of the things that most of the candidates fail in today's approaching arena, or what I can say is in the recruitment cycle entirely, is following up with recruiters. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you interviewed, let's say, and then no one reached out to you after like a week or even like 10 days, I would follow up. I would send a gentle email reminder um that's talking about, hey, like I interviewed last week, or like 2 weeks ago. I'm waiting to hear back. I would love to hear more information if you have it. Thank you so much. Like something short, something sweet. But following up is huge. I would do it because sometimes, I mean, maybe the recruiters forget, maybe someone forgets, maybe you've gotten lost in a pile of applications, and I've seen cases where someone follows up and they get an interview, but someone follows up and they get the second interview, they get a job offer. And then if they didn't follow up, they would have never gotten the opportunity. So surprisingly powerful. Even though like you don't want people to forget, like sometimes people do. Everyone makes mistakes. So it's important to be on the front of their mind. So like after 7 to 10 days, they don't respond. Don't follow up in like 2 days, but like after like a week or more, let's say, or like if they said they would come in 2 days and they didn't after like a week or more, just send a gentle follow up email, something like not pushy, but something like, "Hey, just wondering, um, what the status of this is," then I think that's a great idea.
Being upright with following up is one of the key ways to land one more call with a recruiter, right?
Exactly, it's definitely important to do if you are feeling like they haven't responded in a long time.
Did that experience count for you as well, Abhi?
Yes, I've had experiences where I had one interview, no one reached out to me for weeks, like over 2 weeks, so I followed up, and then they scheduled my second interview. So and then I ended up getting the job, so I think, like, it happens. It's real life occurrences that have happened to me, and others, so definitely keep that in mind.
One of the LinkedIn posts shows that asking for referrals is the best way to find a new job. I want to hear more on that.
Yeah, so referrals are powerful. I wouldn't throw them out like candy and say it's the only way to get a job or it is you have to have a referral to get a job because you don't. But and a lot of people like the volume of referrals has gone up in the last few years drastically because people are realizing referrals are important, but they're also making them a little less powerful because of it as a preface, but they're still powerful. About still like 71% of interviews come from referrals, which is huge, and only like 7% of candidates get referrals. So it's massive difference. So the key here is that, like I mentioned, with the engaging with people that you want to have that have your ideal job, that's your door into referrals. So you don't want to like ask a recruiter. You want to ask the person that is like on the team that you're hiring like that you want the job for, like a product manager at Apple, you want that job, reach out to them. But you need to follow the process I mentioned previously. Like you need to engage with their content, you need to give them value, and don't ask for the referral yet. Maybe ideally if you can get 15 minutes on the call with them, or like even just messaging, asking them like a quick advice thing, and then sharing your take on this article and asking their take, something quick, and something like valuable to them if you can. That would be ideal because then when you're applying, when you're thinking of applying, you can say, hey, I'm interested in product management and Apple. I think I would be a good fit because of XYZ. And I've been loving your content and getting to know you better. Would you be open to putting in a referral for me? No worries if not, like giving them an easy out for them to say no, because it is okay to them say no. No worries if not, or if you're not comfortable with doing so. But just wanted to ask. Thank you. Something like that. 9 out of 10 times they'll say yes. I've had massive success in this when I've asked this way. Almost everyone will say yes because it's easy for them, and sometimes they even get money out of getting a candidate referred. Um, so I would say that's the best way to do it. And referrals just land you like it makes sure the recruiters look at your resume more closely. Because like if there's 100 resumes, like I sometimes your resume just gets scanned or like just it won't be on the top of the pile, but this helps get it to the top of the pile with all the other referrals. And in that way, it's really helpful because okay, that's all it gets you though. So it doesn't mean it still means your resume needs to be great. It means like if you do get the interview, you need to interview great, and it's not going to help you like going forward. It just helps your resume be seen, and that's where it's helpful, like be seen more closely, and potentially get you more preference for an interview. So they're important. Most companies have referral systems that anyone who's working at the company can refer you um, across the departments, but ideally like the job you want, and the person can refer you. So I think yeah, referrals are. I mean, they're important, and everyone's been stressing them lately, which is why the volume has gone up. But I still would stress getting them is important because they just help you. The likelihood of getting interviews is higher.
Get your foot on the door, but after that, it's up to you to land the job.
Exactly.
You mentioned 71% of the interviews come from referrals. Is that a current analysis of 2022 or a 2 to 3 year collective data?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's over the last few years, and I think it's across like all interviews. I might have been collected by like LinkedIn or like a broader statistic. So I think it's across a lot of industries across a few years. I don't think it's not like across like 10 years or anything like that. I think it's recent history. Um, but that's what I would say there. And I'm sure it changes. Like I don't know what a recent like let's say a new article comes out or like a past article says, but like if anything, it's still going to be like a higher than 50% come from referrals for the most part because volume of referrals are getting higher. So if then like yes, referrals may be less and less impactful, but also not getting a referral would be more and more impactful because it would be even harder to get stand out with like a bunch of referred candidates.
Indeed, it becomes tough for a recruiter for understanding where the candidate comes from when the resume is the only thing that shows the candidate. And more on that is they have to understand the candidate and decide in a split 15 to 20 minutes, okay, this candidate fits our culture, fits the job, fits with the skill, and we have to take him in and train it again. There is a lot of decision making skill that happens on the recruitment part as well, which gets overshadowed from the candidates. What's your take on the part of the decision making process of the recruitment industry?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I would say number one, it's they don't have much time for every resume. A lot of these conglomerates could get over 100,000 resumes It's pretty insane. So a lot of times it's just scanning, like scanning for 10 to 15 to 30 seconds, like maybe even like a minute or two for each resume. Um, it's very quick. Like that's why like the first scan is like just a scan. Do you have quantitative, like what's your impact? Like maybe there's a highlight reel. What are your actions? Like are you relating to the job that you want? Like do I see skills in there that are applicable to this job, or like are you just is this like not applicable at all? And like very quickly they can tell a strong resume from not. They if recruiters have looked at thousands of resumes, like they know really quickly. In the first 30 seconds, they probably know. Maybe if it gets close, I'll have to look for a few minutes and read some of your experiences. But like it's a scan most of the time. They're not usually not getting into the weeds until after they've already decided to interview you. So I think in that way, you have to make your resume really scannable with like action verbs at the beginning of resumes, quantitative impact, seeing numbers and seeing how they've been impactful. Maybe a highlight reel at the top, and then maybe like a LinkedIn profile that links to any projects you've done related to this. I think like just doing that would help you a lot and stand out versus like a resume that may not have some of those attributes. It just will be an obvious like no and then be over.
You mentioned about the headline, the brief, or the summary, and the action words as well. What exactly would a good template be for a right amount of summary?
Yeah, so it's a tough question. I would not call it. I would purposely try to not call it a summary and then call it like an impact statement or a highlight reel, or something that's like it's really just like let's say 3 sentences, and it's short and sweet, and it's talking about your. So let's say it's like a quick background. This is what I do. This is how I these are my biggest impacts of like all so like here's all my impact like below, like here's like 25 bullets of impact. Here are the 2 bullets of impact that I want to call out. So you want to call it the most related to the job you want and like the thing that's most related to the job you have. So it's just like really showing like this is what I do, this is the impact I have in my job, this is how it relates to the job I want. And then maybe one other sentence depending on like how much you have. Um, and like done. Like prioritize impact. Prioritize like if you read your resume, what do you want your um the recruiter to get away with it? Like what impact do you want them to like okay, this guy, this girl is impactful um in this way. Done. So something really short so they don't have to read through everything to know. I think that way it'll be helpful.
Making it quantitative, actionable, as well as putting the skills right into the resume or the summary which we are talking about. Does a does a recruiter normally sees the skill or just sees the experience? Or does he see the part where you impact, as you said, created a huge impact, such as driven sales for $1 billion company and did a campaign or anything as such? Do they see this, or do they see the experience? Okay, this candidate has a recruitment or has an experience of, let's say, Apple. He's coming from Apple and he's now switching to Dropbox. So do do recruiters see this or that?
So I would say both. I would say impact is the most important because people switch industries all the time if they do this right and not don't have brand names on their profile like Apple or Dropbox. So your impact is the most important because that's really specific. If you have experiences at Apple, at Google, at like the big techs of the world or like something like brand name, yes, it will help you just because if you are applying to something like if you're working at Apple and you apply to Google, they will much more likely interview you because you already have they've already like Apple's already said put their brand of approval on your resume. Like that's what it says. So that means okay, Apple liked this candidate. Okay, we probably will like him too then if Apple has a hard process done. So like that makes them a better candidate because of that. So yeah, like getting your foot in the door and getting that first experience to be more credible is different because like they'll focus on your impact in your current jobs more. And I think having brand name helps for sure because it just helps your credibility. But you don't need it. You don't need it, and people transition without it. So it just depends.
How did you enter this recruitment world? What caused the interest in recruitment?
Yeah, for are you saying for me?
Yeah, how did you transition? Not transition. How did you pick up this recruitment as a part of showing it on LinkedIn?
Yeah, for me, I think there was a part of me that was always interested because in university I was very involved in different clubs and I got to interview a lot of people for them, and so that helped me see the other side of things. I read a lot of resumes. I interviewed a lot of people, so that helped me. Okay, this is like what people look for when they're interviewing people, because I saw a lot of candidates, and then I think I was just always interested in the space, so I kind of read more on LinkedIn, and I got after I got better at kind of understanding this space, I had a lot of friends and asking me questions. I was helping a lot of people because I was in university and people were kind of asking me questions because they were all looking for jobs, and I found myself really helpful. And so I was getting a lot of similar questions, especially recently, about like, okay, what resume should I use? Like, how do you interview? Stuff like I'm answering now today. So I decided I'm gonna start writing my answers because writing is a great way to consolidate the answers I have, so I can send the same thing to a lot of people. So it's writing is scalable; it can reach a lot of people quickly. So that's why I started writing. And then I recently started taking it more seriously because I thought, okay, like in this, a lot of the writing out there and a lot of the mediums are very long form. They're not that actionable. They're not telling you like you mentioned right at the beginning of the podcast. A lot of people know that they need to apply to a job. A lot of people don't know how. A lot of people know how to apply to a job, but they don't know how to do it right. So I think getting people to do it right through really small actionable steps um, is important. I think there's a divide there that people don't have those actionable steps. So if I can keep creating content that's actionable, keep launching my newsletter formally, and kind of making it super actionable, and telling like real life examples, I think in that way, that's kind of why I got involved. And I've kind of met and seen a lot of great creators on here. So it's been a great journey so far.
It's fascinating about your newsletter and the actionable advice that you are posting on LinkedIn. How did you come up with this idea of okay, I need to start a newsletter? Where did the need come from?
Yeah, I think so. LinkedIn followers, Twitter followers, they're only so committed. But a newsletter, you have to get their email. They're a more committed follower base. Like if you have 1,000 LinkedIn followers, sure, but if you have 1,000 newsletter subscribers, that means a lot more because those people have signed up for your content. They're very committed to you, especially if they're reading it. So I would say it's the next logical step in the flow of like getting people committed to you and your content. And I haven't really formally launched like my newsletter weekly yet because I'm still kind of building up my audience. But I think it's the next logical step because it'll help me kind of commit more, get more committed followers, and get more and be able to help people more specifically because a LinkedIn post can only do so much, but eventually, like hopefully, a newsletter can do more, and then like who knows after that to figure it out. But I think it's just like a logical step in getting more specific with people and getting them more committed in my brand, I would say as well.
Your newsletter career confidence. What exactly do you share?
Yeah, so I guess my goal is it's called career confidence because I've seen a lot of people like I was saying like going from confused to confidence is kind of my goal because so many people are confused about the job process and so many people which is like one of the biggest problems with like people struggle with is confidence. Like they don't believe in themselves and that holds them back so much during the job process because if you don't think you can do it and if you don't think you deserve that job it's hard to convince someone you do. So my goal with having these actionable steps is eventually to have people confident in themselves that they can get that job. Like they got it and they can do it again and do it again if they do these things right. So I think that's why it's called career confidence. That's the goal, getting people confident in their careers. And instead of being confused, it's being confident, knowing like the steps to take and seeing and eventually kind of seeing how actual stories have played out, and seeing like this is what people have done, like this is what you can do, this is how you do it, this is what to do. So I think that is kind of that's the goal. I'm working on it, but that's the goal.
You mentioned that you haven't officially launched it because you are building your audience. Is that a target range for building your audience, or is it something you're keeping? Okay, let's wait it out.
Yeah, I think so. Launching a newsletter weekly is a commitment for time. I'll have to write it every week forever. That's the goal. So I think I want to building if my focus can be on building my audience through LinkedIn, through Twitter first, that's honestly just the time I have. Like I would start the newsletter right now if I had the time, but I just don't feel like I do because obviously I still have a full-time job, and I'm doing this on the side. So I think once I feel like it makes sense to start it, like maybe at 1,000 subscribers, let's say, um, then it would make sense. Okay, now that I have enough committed readers, I'm gonna start it. But then it needs to be a time for me that I can like chill out a little bit on my audience building in LinkedIn, and feel like I can post a little less often and put a little more time into the newsletter because it's a commitment and I have to make sure I can balance my time. And so it's just like it's really just an amount of time that I have type of thing right now.
The balancing act of time, your full time job, producing content, as well as showing the audience that okay, I care for you, and I'm showing it on newsletter as well. It's it's a big journey, and getting to that spot is going to take time. I agree with you on that.
Exactly.
What's your one last advice that you would give a candidate?
So my last advice would just say, I mean, a non-actual advice, but it would be say, try to be confident in yourself. Kind of broad, but I think is helpful because that's the toughest thing people struggle with is being confident. And obviously, hopefully, my actionable steps can get you there and teach you to do that. But I would say, like broadly, that would be my last advice because I have a ton of more specific advice that I shared throughout this. So that's like I would say the end goal is kind of to be confident in yourself because I don't want to teach you to get one job. I want to teach you to keep getting the jobs you want if you want them. So it's kind of like a long term type of deal. So that's what I would say.
Keep getting jobs. Got it. I I really enjoyed the conversation, Abhi. Any
Yes,
final words that you want to add?
it's been great. I think just if you're listening, just check out my profile and hopefully you'll find my content useful and subscribe to the newsletter that we'll be launching. And yeah, I think just hoping this was helpful and hoping like you guys can message me or comment with any other questions whenever you want.
All right. That was Abhi, and he has been on LinkedIn and sharing practical, actionable advice that I have seen very less content creators do, and also the part where Abhi is doing it on a part time. Imagine if he would have done it in the full time. That would be 2x of what he is doing right now, I believe. It was a great time, Abhi. Anywhere people can follow you apart from LinkedIn and Twitter.
That's it. And my newsletter. Other than that, that's the three avenues I have right now. Hopefully, we'll keep growing.
All right. All right. Thanks, man. Thanks for being on the podcast. Thanks for being on Job Talks with HR. It was wonderful having your conversation. I have many more questions for you, but I want to take it down a bit and want to invite you again. Thanks for being on the podcast. I would end the podcast now.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.